I called my adoptive mom for the first time. I was adopted when I was 12 years old. Her name was Sarah, and ever since day one, I always called her Sarah. Not because I didn't respect her, it just felt safer that way. And honestly, she never pushed me to call her mom either. On my very first day, she smiled at me and said, "You can call me whatever feels comfortable to you." I think she knew I was still carrying a lot of fear inside me. Sarah worked as a high school librarian. When I first moved into her house, she had already prepared a small but cozy bedroom for me. There was a soft yellow lamp above the bed, a bookshelf against the wall, and a handwritten note sitting on the desk that said, "This room is yours now." At first, I barely talked. I'd come home from school, go straight to my room, and stay there for hours. But Sarah never forced conversations. She never made me explain my feelings. Slowly, we built little routines together. She'd make tea in the evenings. I'd grab the mail from the mailbox for her. She'd ask, "How was your day?" And I'd always answer with the same word, "Fine." But the truth was, for the first time in my life, I actually felt safe living with someone. Still, I kept calling her Sarah. I'm 22 now. I stayed with her through college and never really moved out completely. Sarah was there for every important moment in my life. When I got my first job, she was more excited than I was. When my old laptop stopped working, she secretly bought me a new one. Every birthday, she baked the same chocolate cake, just because one time I mentioned it was my favorite. But even after all those years, the word mom never came out of my mouth. Maybe it had become a habit. Maybe I was scared. Or maybe I thought it was too late now. 2 weeks ago, something happened. I got home around 10:30 at night. It was pouring rain outside. The house felt strangely quiet. I called out, "Sarah?" No answer. I figured she had already gone to bed, but then I suddenly heard something crash in the kitchen. I ran inside. Sarah was sitting on the floor, trying to hold onto the counter with one hand. Her face looked pale. "Sarah!" I dropped to my knees beside her. Her breathing was shaky, and she could barely speak. That's when I remembered she had issues with low blood pressure. I quickly grabbed water for her, but her hands were trembling too badly to hold the glass. Then her eyes slowly started closing. I completely panicked. I called 911 immediately. My voice was shaking so badly I could barely explain what was happening. While talking to the dispatcher, I kept trying to keep Sarah awake. "Sarah, please stay with me. Just a little longer. The ambulance is coming." But seeing her like that terrified me. I grabbed her hand tightly, and without even thinking, I suddenly said, "Mom, please don't leave me." The second the word came out, tears filled my eyes. I kept repeating it over and over. "Mom, please talk to me." She gave the slightest nod, but couldn't speak. A few minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, and I rode with her to the hospital. The entire drive there, my heart felt like it was going to explode. At the hospital, the doctors said her blood pressure had dropped dangerously low, but thankfully, she was going to be okay. I finally breathed again. That night, I stayed beside her hospital bed in one of those awful chairs that nobody can actually sleep in. The next morning, I woke up and noticed Sarah looking at me. She had this soft little smile on her face. Then she quietly asked, "Did you really call me Mom?" I froze. "What?" She looked at me for a second before saying softly, "Last night, when you were scared." Then she smiled again. "You called me Mom twice." My throat tightened instantly. "You remember that?" She nodded slowly. "Everything was blurry, but I could hear your voice." The room went completely quiet for a few seconds. Then she reached over and held my hand. "I never wanted to pressure you," she said softly, "but honestly, I've wanted to hear that for a very long time." I felt tears sliding down my face. "I'm sorry it took me this long," I whispered. She squeezed my hand gently and said, "No, the timing was perfect." Later that afternoon, the doctors discharged her. On the way home, we stopped at a small diner for lunch. Neither of us talked much. Then the waitress came over to take our order. I looked at Sarah and asked, "Mom, what are you getting?" For a few seconds, she just stared at me. Her eyes watered a little, but she simply smiled and said, "Whatever you're having." Yesterday, I called her from work. She answered with her usual hello, and without even thinking this time, I smiled and said, "Hey Mom, do you need me to pick anything up on my way home?" There was a tiny pause on the other end of the phone. Then she answered normally, "No honey, just come home safe." But I could hear the smile in her voice the entire